Welcome to another fabulous episode of Stratola Spectrum. I'm your host, Dinesh Chandrasekhar, Chief Analyst and founder of Stratola. Over the last 2 years, the AI market has been obsessed with model performance. Bigger models, faster models, smarter models. But the real test of reality is whether AI can operate inside the reality of a business. Can it understand the meaning of a customer, a policy, a metric, a risk signal, or a workflow the way business understands it? Can it act on the understanding with consistency, trust, and accountability? That is why the conversation is shifting towards context. When I say context, I'm not just talking about a better prompting technique or a larger token window or even a richer metadata layer. My question is whether enterprises can truly build a usable system of meaning around their data, a system that connects semantics, ontology, relationships, governance, lineage, and decision history in a form that machines can actually use at runtime. Because without that, even the most advanced agent is still operating with partial understanding. And you know what that means? Partial understanding in an enterprise setting produces the wrong action, the wrong recommendation, or the wrong decision at scale. That is the real fault line in enterprise AI today. Let us ask if enterprises are structured enough to supply intelligence with the right context. And if context becomes the missing layer between raw data and reliable action, then it will become a discussion about architecture, control, and ownership of the operating model for AI inside the enterprise. Now, with that context, let us talk about the topic of the day, AI context. Joining us today is Prukalpa Sankar, the founder and co-CEO of Atlan. Atlan is positioning itself as the context layer for AI. She has been early to a defining idea of the AI era that context is queen, as she likes to say it. Before Atlan, Prakalpa co-founded Social Cops, the world's largest government data lake powering the UN's SDG monitoring, recognized by the New York Times as well as the World Economic Forum. She's been featured in Forbes 30 under 30 and Fortune 40 under 40. So with that, let's welcome Prakalpa to the show. Welcome, Prakalpa.
Thank you for having me, Dinesh.
Excellent. So I have been hearing a lot about how Atlan has like positioned itself as the context platform company. I've heard a lot of your talks over the last several months across like various podcasts and stuff. And what I don't want to do is like repeat the same questions from those same conversations that you've had before. So I want to approach this from a different perspective and ask you about context, which is again like hot on top of everybody's minds, but at the same time, take a little different perspective on understanding the nature of what this means in today's enterprises and so forth. So maybe I'll start off by saying that a lot of the industry still talks about context as if it is like just better retrieval, right? But the way you've been describing it is much broader. You say that it's not AI is not just about like improving language, but it's about improving your businesses. It's about understanding your business and all that. So at a systems level, what is context actually made up of when an enterprise wants its agents to operate reliably in production?
Yeah, um, that's a great question. And let me start by saying that context, I've been thinking a lot about it as what's the parallel to humans. Because when people are thinking about agents today, I think we're still thinking about this like it's technology. Like let me onboard a tool and let me get it to operate in a certain way. Uh, but for the first time, we have technology that has intelligence. And that's a little bit more like making a human operate
Mm-hmm.
effectively at its job. Uh, and I think we need to rethink how we are onboarding agents. So, what is an agent? If you were to think about an agent as a human worker, it's a human worker that has some basic level of intelligence.
Yeah.
It is a human worker that has skills of a certain kind to do that job. It's a human worker that also has institutional knowledge and context. That is what leads to higher order judgment and decision making and what they call intuition on the job. Uh,
Correct.
and if you look at the last 40 years of studies about human performance, what you'll realize is that after a base level of cognition or intelligence, human performance on a job has nothing to do with intelligence. It's
Hmm.
actually all these other things. It's about context and judgment and knowledge and institutional practices, tacit knowledge. These are the things that actually separate a great human employee from an average human employee. Uh, well, how do you onboard a human employee right now into your company? Right? Like when you join, like you don't just like drop them, give them a table,
Go
give
figure it.
them a computer and just say like, figure it out, right? What you do is you onboard them, you run them through an onboarding plan. They learn the company's values, they learn the company's strategy. Then you get them on their onboarding task where they start getting proficient. You give them a mentor. The mentor keeps giving them feedback so that they get to a certain level. And then after that, you don't just drop them, right? They join other colleagues to learn. They join town halls where they understand what's changing about a business.
Yeah.
They start absorbing all this institutional knowledge in many ways. And that's what defines, that's why they say, over time, people start getting better at their jobs. If you've had someone who stayed for like 5 years and is great, like keep them, like hold on to them. We need to start thinking about agents like that. In the next 2 years, companies will hire more digital workers than human employees, but we're not thinking about how we actually give them context. The
Correct.
intelligence is already here. For all intents and purposes, AGI is already here. It's just not useful. Uh, that's what context is, in my mind.
Makes sense. So, but if you were to like break it down at a systems level, there are like various parts to this, right? So there is a semantic layer aspect to it. There is governance. There is lineage that is needed. There are rules and definitions, ontology, and so many different things. Is it really that complex, or are we making it that complex? Because we don't understand what we actually are looking for.
That's a great question. I mean, our industry is really good at like creating all kinds of buzzwords that sound really they just sound sophisticated.
Yeah.
The way I like it is complex though. I think context is complex, and I'll explain it with a very simple question. Let's ask a question. What are my top 10 customers? Y- Sounds like a really simple question. Uh, it's
Depends on
actually
who you ask.
exactly, right? Imagine if sales was asking the question of what are top 10 customers, it might be top 10 customers based on revenue. If customer success is asking, it might be top 10 customers based on adoption. If marketing is asking, it might be top 10 customers whose logos I can use on this website. So, first, intent, user intent, action intent is
Yeah.
important. Then there comes the meaning context, which is how do I define top 10 in my company? It's not even how do I define customer in my company, it's how do I define top 10 in my company?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And what matters to me. So, for example, let's pick the marketing one. If you're a company that's looking to rebrand yourself in this AI era, as every company is doing, you might want to focus on logos that are AI forward in your right. And so, like, what does the meaning of top 10 mean aligned with the company strategy?
Right.
Then we actually come to things like semantics. How do I define a customer? Uh, and how do I define a customer is different based on different kinds of, finance will probably define a customer differently, sales will define a customer differently. Uh, there's probably some tacit knowledge associated with it. We started announcing this year that we're going to start running a different kind of trials programs. And these people will sign agreements with us, but they're not really customers because we're not going to report it
Right.
in our annual report to our shareholders. Right? There's tacit knowledge. This is what a finance analyst does. And eventually there's data context, which is what you said, which is who all are allowed to access this file? How do I measure customer? What's the metric? We call these 5 layers of context. We have a context layering diagram. The way we think about it is user context.
You also have your own five-layer cake.
Yes, we have our own 5 layer cake, but hopefully it's simpler language, right? Like the way I like to define it, it's user context on top of knowledge context, on top of meaning context, on top of data context. All of these things together come together to help you answer a question and give an agent what it needs to be able to operate.
Okay.
Now, all of this, now I can go into the details. At the meaning context level, semantics becomes important, or a semantic layer becomes important. At the knowledge context layer, ontology, or the map of how
The
agent
relationships
discovers the
and
relationships start becoming important. At the data context layer is when catalog and governance and lineage, these become important. And so I think you can start mapping these industry buzzwords to these five layers. But I like to think about, I actually, the best analogy for me is, how would a human answer this question?
Mhm.
And now the only difference is the human does not have the cafeteria conversation. Uh, so then how do you actually give an agent the trace to be able to operate at least as well as a human can in that scenario,
Right.
is
Right.
what the context problem is.
Awesome. Awesome. No, very well explained. Thank you. And I like the layering of the context as well. I think that makes it a lot more easier to understand for sure. Um, Maybe I'll take a step back and ask you, Atlan, right, is a clearly pushing beyond the traditional catalog category. What convinced you? When did you get convinced that metadata alone was not enough, that it was too small a frame for where the market is headed?
Um, It's been a journey, and maybe the journey comes from our history as a company. Because
Hmm.
Atlan was never founded to be a data catalog or a metadata platform. We were founded as a data team ourselves. And we were just trying to solve our own problems, quite honestly. Like, it was really hard to answer these questions, like number on a dashboard is broken, we don't know why. And as we tried to answer those questions, we realized that every time data moved, we lost context alongside that. Uh,
Hmm.
every time data moved from Salesforce to Snowflake, and moved from that to a BI tool, and moved from, there's a pipeline in the middle. Every time this move or hop happens, some amount of context is lost. And if you want to make a team work well together, teams need shared context. Without that, they're not going to be able to operate. That was how we started Atlan. That's how we started building for ourselves. Our approach on it was always very different. Like, we
Hmm.
believed uh, you shouldn't need a data steward as an afterthought. This should just be something that my engineer should just push it as a part of their code. Like, why should this be an afterthought? And maybe
Hmm.
that was because of just our lineage of how we started. Like, we were just a team, honestly, trying to solve our own problems.
Right.
2022, Atlan AI happened. We were the first company in our space and category to launch Atlan AI as a first class citizen. It led a pretty large growth spurt for our company. And we said, this new technology is going to be able to take away so much manual work that is done to help understand the data estate. But we pushed the boundary on it, and we were never able to get to more than 70% of accuracy. And we were the
Hmm.
highest actually in the industry by far. But we kept pushing and pushing, and we couldn't get to more than 70% of accuracy. And that's when we realized that metadata infrastructure was never built for a world where AI is going to be the primary producer of context and AI
Hmm.
is going to be the primary consumer of
Consumer.
context.
Okay.
Uh, every single action that any agent in any company does, the first thing they'll do is it'll run a search and it'll run a
Hmm.
context search. That needs a fundamentally different plane of latency and compute requirements than has existed on the planet. Hopefully, every action or any creation, every interaction that happens today creates more context. And agents are going to create far more context than humans were ever able to create. Uh, that was when we realized that we were solving, we were maybe sitting on this problem where we were solving context for data. And then we realized actually context will be the backbone for any AI use case, not
Hmm.
just a data analytics use case. Uh, we started with that a journey to rebuild Atlan from its foundations. We reimagined our architecture. So we actually launched something last year called a context lakehouse, which is an iceberg native infrastructure. We were like, let's not reinvent the wheel. We just went through this in data world, right? Like, we went from data lake to data warehouse to data lakehouse. We finally just figured out these patterns in the data world.
Yeah.
So we brought those into the context world. We rebuilt those primitives. On top
Hmm.
of that, we launched actually something called context agents, uh, which is this whole team of agents that's working together to actually create and curate the context of your company. And I'm actually very happy to report, as of this week, we have tipped over from AI assisted workflows to autonomous workflows. This is the first week on Atlan where the amount of context created by autonomous workflows has superseded the amount of context created by humans plus AI assisted workflows combined. Uh,
Wow.
and the
What does an autonomous workflow look like? What does it mean?
An autonomous workflow is, I'll pick something simple. We have an agent in Atlan called Scribe. Scribe basically goes and creates column descriptions. Uh, and we've had a version of this for a really long time, since 2022. Uh, but the workflow used to be humans would use Scribe to go create version one, and then uh, after that, like they would update it with other human context.
Right.
We just tipped over the workflow when I say autonomous, that Scribe is better than 99.9% of humans that would write a column description. Because Scribe today goes and reads all lineage, it goes and understands what your Salesforce field was, it understands everything about the BI and the end use case, and it writes the most helpful piece of context. So now we've finally tipped over where actually our human users are like, wow, Stripe's actually better than humans. And now our human users are like, well, I am going to become the bottleneck because I can't approve all these things. It's too much.
Too much.
Uh, and so, to give you an example of those autonomous workflows, a column, like the way we think about it, context quality really compounds over time. So we have an agent that writes column descriptions with using lineage and SQL. Then that feeds in an agent that does domain tagging. And now because it has column descriptions, the quality of the domain tagging is way higher. Then we basically tell it to go read through the SQL with the domain tags and generate metrics and KPIs. So we have a different agent for that. And the quality of metrics and KPIs is really high. Then we have an agent that actually takes that and starts generating relationships and
Hmm.
ontologies, as we were talking about. And so what we've been focused a lot on is the harness for context agents, and how do you actually get the quality of this to tip over in a way that it's going to be better than humans, to be able to reverse construct the truths of the business.
Very fascinating. Congratulations on getting to that stage. I think we are going to hear more of this kind of news like across the industry for sure. A lot of vendors are very excited about pushing towards the autonomous boundary for sure. Um,
I do
it's
want to say that I do want to say something though. I feel like everybody is. I mean, right now everybody is marketing agents, right? Everybody's marketing, and these things demo really well. Uh,
Yeah.
and I do think there's a very there's a chasm. Like, oh my god, it is so hard to go from the demo to this thing. Like the true signal that this thing is really better than 99.9% of humans, and we can tip over. Like that journey is really hard. And I think that actually like if I look back, I think the infrastructure investments that we made
Hmm.
are the only reason we were able to get here. We would not have been able to get here without. If we just slapped AI on our existing product, like there is no way we would have been able to push the boundary on this.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. So we spoke about a few concepts here. I want to kind of go back to that market perspective here, right? I've been at a couple of conferences in the last few weeks, and one thing that I heard over and over again are these two terms, ontology and semantic layers, back and forth, right? There is clearly a renewed interest in ontology right now. I don't know like where from this sprouted, but this happened over the course of time in the last year or so. Um, why is ontology re-emerging in your perspective at this moment instead of remaining like a niche knowledge management construct, as it often did in like the previous, enterprise waves that we have seen?
Yeah. Um, a large part of it is because people have just started going through the production life cycle of getting AI from a shiny demo to a production use case.
Hmm.
Uh, and what you realize when you actually take AI to a production use case is that for the first time, your end product is not bounded. Uh, so, let's pick the old world. You were trying to build a dashboard, or you were trying to build an application or a UI. The end actions that whatever this thing was supposed to do was bounded, right? Like you would have a set
Sure.
of actions and then you would have to work backward uh,
Right.
to be able to solve for that. In that world, I would say an ontology is a good to have, not a must have. Uh, Now, for the first time, the actual end use cases, once you open up an agent, is infinite.
Mm.
Something as simple as you're launching a marketing agent on your website.
Hmm.
Uh, let's say you train it on all your marketing content. You've done a great job of knowledge management on your marketing content, but an end user goes there and asks a support question. What are you going to do? Like, and you can control the fact that the end user is going to go there and ask a support
Right.
question. I was talking to a large telco the other day, and they were telling me that they have a if they have a very well built out support agent for end customers. They said, but if I now have to solve the CSAT problem, I actually have to solve the network problem.
Mm.
Uh, and these are all connected problems. Over time, actually, humans have created organizational silos because of our inefficiencies. AI
Right.
doesn't have these inefficiencies. Um, so, what does AI need? Intelligence has tipped over. In the last 6 months, roughly, intelligence has dramatically tipped over. And in fact, we are at the worst intelligence that we will ever see today, right? Like it's the worst case in our lifetimes. This is the lowest point that we will be at. It's only getting better. Uh,
Better.
so, what does AI need? It needs a map. I believe AI right today is very valuable. It's just not useful, and it's not useful because it doesn't understand your business context. Uh, an ontology is a map to me,
Mm.
and it's something that allows AI to navigate your business and understand your business. And only if you are able to solve for that are you able to take AI from valuable to useful. That's what I think is driving the renewed interest in all of these fields, right? Knowledge management, ontology, semantics. Uh, they've just become part of the execution paths. I think before it was an afterthought. It was a good case practice. Now it's an execution path. You can't take AI to production unless you solve these problems.
Fascinating. But it's very intuitive as well. If you look at it from that perspective, I think it makes more sense. But then if a company has metadata, if they have lineage, if they have a glossary, if they have a BI semantic layer, what is still missing then before the company can say that it has a usable context layer?
Yeah.
What needs to be there?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think this is where people actually mess it up because context for the data world is not context for AI. They're two different.
Perfect. I wanted you to say that. I think that's exactly what it was driving at.
They're really two different things. Because, and it goes back actually to the simple question I asked you about what are top 10 customers, right?
Yeah.
If a company had very well defined data catalog, lineage, metadata, business glossary, they probably have in that layer data context and some amounts of meaning context, maybe. That's not enough for AI to go into production. And that's the journey that we're taking our customers through, which is yes, these are great foundations. I think a company that has that, you're in better foundation than a company that doesn't have that.
Hmm.
But it's not going to help you take AI into production, and you're going to have to like up level that and translate it into context for AI.
Awesome. No, I think that makes it more sense. So maybe in this same context, sorry for the lack of better words, in the context is what it is. In the same context, where does Atlan fit in? Like, if a company has all these different already
Yeah.
set up for their data architecture, how do you enable this context layer for AI?
Yeah. So here's what I typically tell customers. I tell customers to think about this in two ways. Uh, the first that I tell them is today AI can you if you're able to unleash AI in the right way and with the right harness, you can reverse construct a lot of your organizational truths. So the first thing that we do is we will plug into all of your systems. including if you have an existing data catalog. We will plug into all of that. And then, as I told you about context agents will basically go and work on this to go and reverse construct your organization's model. I
Yeah.
like to call it the organization world model. Hopefully, all of this is like automated, no, not really much human effort except connectivity into systems, and you go. And then here's what I tell customers. I say, after this, you should not try and over engineer this ontology. Like, you should not run an ontology project for 2 years in the hope that somebody will use this.
Yeah.
What we do is we actually align into the context engineering workflows for AI use cases that are being
Mm-hmm.
put into production. So, what we have a product called Context Engineering Studio. What that does is, let's say I'm trying to launch a sales agent in my company. I'll start there as a builder. What we will do is we will bootstrap first. So we'll basically say, hey, across all the context that you have, here's the base context that already can go into this. So we solve a lot of the time to value problems. We've had customers tell us it's so easy to build an agent, but it takes me 5 months to actually give it the business context
Right.
to solve that problem. Then we run a human in the loop process along with AI by running simulations. This is where the tacit knowledge that I was telling you about that humans have, that AI doesn't have, shines. Because we have all this base context, what we can do is we can also start running simulations and say, okay, for this use case, based on all the context that I have, what could be the 100 scenarios? What could be the 1,000 scenarios? What could be the
Right.
10,000 scenarios of how an end user or agent will consume this? So AI does that. AI also then looks at the context that you have and say, okay, where are there gaps?
Right.
Then AI also does the first round of improving that context
Mm-hmm.
and then brings it to the human and says, hey, human, now go add this as extra context that's missing. And that's in some ways, this tacit knowledge thing is such a like never ending problem, right? Like, how do you get all the tacit knowledge of your company into one place? What we do is we use this as a process to actually just shine the light. This tacit knowledge is important for this end business use case that you want to go live with. So that's the second layer of getting something into production. And then we actually use, once AI goes into production, it's creating a lot of context.
Mm-hmm.
And this is creating traces and memory. We feedback that to create a living compounding context system. So let's look at a simple example. If I'm an end user who says, what are my top 10 customers? And now AI says, this is what your top 10 customers are. And then this human goes like, oh, actually, that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for top 10 customers by the Europe region. And then AI says, oh, okay, here's top 10 customers for Europe region. And then it now knows that this human cares about Europe. So it says, okay, is this something that's relevant for you in the future that you want to look at only Europe region? And then it looks at the people graph and it says, you're also the manager. Is it also
Mm.
true that if someone in your team asks this question in the future, they will only look at stuff for Europe? It adds that back into your common context layer, right? And so you can continue to compound. This is one very simple example, but how people use and whether it's accurate or inaccurate, the feedback that they give, the way they talk to AI, it's creating a lot of additional context that can come back into your living compounding system.
Right. How should teams think about freshness in a context layer? Because it's one thing to like model concepts correctly, that, but it's another thing to like ensure that the agent is actually acting on the current version of reality, right? Because business keeps improving, changing all the time, so the context obviously also keeps changing. So where does freshness come in? How do you make sure that freshness is relevant in a context layer like that?
Yeah, this is why we believe that context needs to be managed like an asset, just like data was.
Hmm.
You're actually coming down to the core of it, right? Which is business context keeps changing. Uh, Context needs to be propagated. Maybe the company changed its strategy on
Pricing policy
pricing
changed.
policy changed. Uh, that needs to propagate down into the marketing agent, and that needs to propagate down to the customer success agent, and that
Yeah.
needs. Uh, that I believe is the core of, like, that's why we like to think about, we like we believe the base of this is, like I said, a context lakehouse. And we believe the context lakehouse is actually exactly what a data warehouse was in the analytics world. A context lakehouse will be for the AI world. And the same problems we just went through with the data world, right? Which is freshness, quality, propagation, state. State is such an interesting one because let's say an agent does something wrong, but your context has changed. Uh, you still need versioning.
Yeah.
You need to
Yeah.
go back to understand why it did
Correct.
something wrong, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So all these problems will become very critical in the context world. We are taking a lot of patterns from the data world to be able to solve. Like that, how do you take the right patterns from the data world and bring it to the context world? And then at the same time, how do you take the right patterns from the AI world and bring it to the context world? I think both of those things, if you merge together, there's so for example, you could have a context maker and a context checker agent.
Mm.
And uh, there's now like a lot of in the last month or so there's a lot of auto learning loops that are starting to get created, right? And so how do you bring that into the world of context so your context is always updated? Maybe if something fundamentally changes, a lot of us have been playing around with OpenFlow, right? And so it actually pushes it out to the human who governs and says thumbs up, thumbs down,
Yeah.
should I update this? So I think those are the loops that need to get built in the context world for things like freshness, propagation, problems like this.
Um, there is also this notion around where does the context layer belong within an organization, right? So there is talks about open context, there is shared context and all that.
Yeah.
Open and portable context kind of sounds right in theory, but in practice, the enterprise context is like messy, it's political, it's full of like local exceptions and all that.
Yeah.
Sales manager says this and the VP says differently and all that. So what keeps a shared context layer from collapsing into the same entropy problem that probably hit like, master data or semantic layer initiatives in the past?
Yeah. Um, I think the first and the most important is that it needs to be in the execution path. So I
Needs to
think
be
in the execution path.
okay in the
Be-
execution path. Okay.
Because the problem with semantic layers, let's pick actually semantic layers as a great example, right? I think there's a lot to learn from semantic layers. The only semantic layer that worked in practice
Hmm.
was when Looker decided to build a BI tool on top of semantics. And so, as a part of creating the BI, which drove value, you had to create semantics. Uh, Wherever these initiatives have failed, they failed because they've been people have tried to do it for the sake of doing it in some ways, with good intent. I'm not saying without good intent. Like,
Yeah.
with good intent, we should have a shared semantic layer. It's a good thing to do. We should have a shared, like, these problems are true. I'm not saying they're not.
Right. Right.
But business is real. Business is fast. It's messy, and priorities change. And you need to like push something. Like in the next 2 weeks, these things are real too. And in fact, I think they're only going to compound. AI is only going to make us all move faster, not slower.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so we believe the right way of doing this is that context engineering workflows need
Hmm.
part of the core development workflow of building and shipping AI.
Hmm.
Uh, and as a part of this, it just needs to be built the right way. So I had a customer the other day who said, I now have uh, Google Agent Space, I have Sierra, I have Writer, I have Snowflake Cortex. And now I have these I have 12 agentic platforms, I have hundreds of agents. And now these agents are not speaking the same language. So the same problem where in data they should have this
Data
joke, right?
silos.
Yeah, like if you ask finance and sales the revenue number, you'll get two different numbers. The same thing is happening just at much higher compounded scale,
Yeah.
but also, quite honestly, for pretty like worse outcomes, right? Like these are like you're trying to build autonomous systems and agentic systems, and you're trying to someone's insurance policy will get accepted or rejected based on this.
Yeah.
So it's actually much more critical that this is accurate, and we have a shared way of doing this. Uh, so I think there's a way to learn from data warehouses because data warehouses were able to decouple use cases and the warehouse. And it was just built in a shared way where people did ship into the warehouse, but the end use cases were across, analytics platform would use it, a machine learning platform would use it. That's the paradigm that I believe will be the right paradigm to go with. We believe there will be a centralized context platform,
Nice.
uh, but context itself will be federated.
I was just about to ask you about centralization and federation, and you just answered it. I think that's fabulous. So maybe then I'll ask you one other question, which is uh, MCPs, right? So do you feel like, MCPs are enabling context architectures better, or is it like, a hindrance right now?
So, a few things. I believe the protocols are going to change rapidly.
Hmm.
I think MCP was a
Will
great
still
protocol at
evolve
the
for
time,
sure.
but I believe it has its own challenges, which we're facing.
Right.
And there's, I think on Twitter every week there's a thread about whether it's MCP is dead or MCP is not dead, or is it CLI or is it
Every-
not? Like there's like all kinds of versions of this. I honestly think they're missing the point.
Hmm.
I just think anyone who's building in today's world, it doesn't make sense to be purist about any framework right now.
Okay.
MCP, like we're in such early era of AI right now. MCP will evolve, CLI will evolve, A2A will evolve. I'm sure next year you and I we'll be talking about some new protocol that we've not heard of so far, right? Uh, so the question that I like to think about is principle on open and interoperability is very critical.
Hmm.
The worst thing anyone can do right now, and any leader right now can do, is lock themselves into anything
Hmm.
because it's going to change. And companies, even 3 month head start against a competitor is maybe like light years of competitive advantage in today's.
Agreed. Agreed.
Uh, so, how do you then make sure that whatever choices you're picking today
Hmm.
are open and interoperable and allow you to change with the future? um, Pick that and believe that change will happen. That's kind of the way I like to think about the world today. So, for example, when we think about the context, yeah, I tell customers this all the time. I'm like, context is your business IP. Like, what's different about your competitor's customer support chatbot and your customer support chatbot? Because both of you have access to the same models.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So then it's my business IP. What's different about my company, my shared norms, how I operate? Make sure it's open, make sure it's interoperable. Uh, Let the frameworks play out their framework worse. And it's fine. We will just keep upgrading to whatever is the right way of doing it.
Extend that same um, tone that you had about, like, you were almost like giving a practical advice to like people that are, adopting technologies, and you said, like, don't get tied to anything yet. I think it'll be kind of futile.
Yeah.
Be more open and all that. I think that's good, pragmatic advice for sure. Extend that into a serious, advice conversation. If you were to like give that to a CIO, CTO today that is planning to deploy context layer into their organizations, where should they start first? What should they do?
Yeah. I would actually start one step before the context layer and I would start at the business problem.
Okay.
And I would say, okay, well, let's actually just start at like, what are your top four business problems that need to get solved in the next 3 to 6 months? Uh, then let's figure out what your AI platform infrastructure needs to look like so that as you solve these problems and take them into production, you're building it in a way that compounds over time. So you build the machine that builds the machine, right? And with AI platform builds, if you're able to build your core AI platform in a way
Hmm.
that you're not just taking these first three AI use cases into production, you're also building the platform so that your next three AI use cases don't take the same amount of time as your first three AI use cases.
Makes sense.
You can go from 3 to 300. Then I think you win. And so that's the second thing I would do to a CIO. I would say, let's build your AI platform architecture. Here's the 2 or 3 blocks that need to go into it. One of those blocks is the context layer.
Hmm.
And I would say, well, in this context layer, let's pick your top four use cases. and let's just build it alongside your top three use cases so you get it into production. And then let's have the operating model that you build for long term. That goes along. So that's how I would probably talk to a CIO who's
Nice.
adopting an AI use case right now.
How long are you seeing these projects take to onboard and set up and implement and see success? Because one of the things that I'm struggling with, I think the entire industry is with the ROI conversations, right? People want to know, when do I see ROI? I'm deploying agents and all that. I'm not sure if I'm even seeing ROI in the first place. This is a very critical part of that ROI conversation, in my opinion, because if you get this right, your agents are going to be more trustworthy, less hallucinations, more productive, understanding your context of your business. Your business results are going to be like, more predictable. Uh, this is going to be a game changer for sure. So in this case, the big question is, how soon can I get it out into production?
Yeah. I mean, we've had customers tell us things like, I was stuck in testing hell for 5 months and now I've taken this to production in 5 days. So the value conversation is dramatically shrinking. Um, there's there used to be a time when I think you had 6 months to take a project to production.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think you have that time anymore. The world's changing too fast. Uh, and in fact, a lot of our work with customers has been trying to find a way for them to get out of their own way. Uh, and a lot of that is actually questions around what are the business priorities? Is this really the most important problem you're going to solve? In that case, like, let's break the boundaries of all the things that are stopping you from being able to get there. And most of those things are actually not technology anymore. Most of those things are organizational change, who owns this thing, legal agreements. At this point, actually, those are the things that are actually I'd say, slowing AI
Gotcha.
projects down. In a more practical note, though, uh, what we're seeing with our most forward thinking customers is you have to cross the chasm. And that's the hardest part to do. And the chasm is a pain.
Hmm.
And I have so much empathy for the technology leaders that are, especially in non technology first companies, because then you're talking to business that doesn't understand this. And the business is like, they're playing around with chat gpt and they are like, oh well, like, look at this is so good, why can't I have it on my company's data and my internal company's processes? And I think they kind of don't realize that, well, actually, but like, firstly, like, we've been working on LLM technology for, you know, like 15 years at the minimum, right? Like, so I think that is unevenly distributed right now, which is the expectation that people have because of personal AI in their lives and
Hmm.
what they expect from business AI, and the fact that the foundations of businesses are not set up for that today. Um, and so, what I like to tell customers is that's why it's so critical that you build the foundation alongside building your first few use cases so that you can go fast after that, right? Like, you might have a grace period now, that grace period of 6 to 12 months, if you're lucky, 18 months maybe exists
Right.
now for you.
Right.
But that grace period is going to go away fast, and you need to be able to get to one use case, three use case, 10 use case, 300 use case. Like, that has to be your curve. And so
Mm.
building the foundation alongside it is very critical.
Mm.
And we have to build the plane while we're flying it. That's the reality that we all operate in today.
Right. So maybe one even more forward-looking question, which is, let's say the CIO takes your advice, starts, hammering it out, and then now is like deploying agents left, right, and center. Company has like, let's say, 500 agents across finance, support, operations, everything. Hypothetical, of course, 500 agents. What do you think will break first? Is it like, shared definitions or the access policy consistencies, or, is it like memory freshness or the ability to audit how context was even assembled at decision time?
Um, all of those things will break if you don't build your foundations the right way. Yeah, all of those things are going to break. Um, and you might have to rebuild also when you get to 500, and I think that's okay. So what I would actually tell customers is that if you are in that moment, that is a great problem to have. Let's fight that problem at that time.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think what I more practically see today
Hmm.
is that the biggest challenge that people have, I kind of break it into three things. The first is they don't get up and running at all. The demo is beautiful and they're not able to take it to production because of
Yeah.
data connectivity, context bootstrapping. The second problem I see is testing hell. People get stuck in testing hell because the North Star is, well, there's no North Star. If you don't get to 70-80% of accuracy, I had a customer the other day who said we launched 1,000 Databricks Genie rooms. We got really excited. And within a month, 90% were abandoned.
Wow.
Uh, and we're seeing this constantly with customers. If you don't get to 70-80% accuracy, business just abandons. They don't want to talk to you. If you get to 70-80% accuracy, then they're happy. They believe they want to like iterate with you. So
Yeah.
but as a team, what is 70-80% accuracy? I don't even know what a North Star is, right? And so you're just stuck in this loop and you're paralyzed, and someone will ask some question to the AI and it won't answer it accurately, and trust breaks like that. That loop is a problem. Uh,
Yeah.
and then finally, I think portability. Once you start getting to a true multi-agent architecture, you have three or four of these agents, then you start dealing with the portability problem on context.
Yeah.
And then at some point it becomes unimaginable, right? Like you start dealing with, all these humans are shipping agents, and these agents don't talk, like they're not talking the same language, and then you don't know which one to update. You update it in one place, but it doesn't like propagate. Uh,
Right.
so I think how you solve for that is the third layer that I see as the biggest challenge.
Very cool. Prakalpa, this has been a fantastic conversation. Maybe one last question before we wrap this up is what are you most excited about in the next 6 to 12 months that's going to happen in the space? Do you follow any particular technology trend or anything that you are excited about that's going to change the way how we are looking at the space?
I am the most excited I have been since I was 21 years old. Uh, I I feel so fortunate every day to even be in this moment and to get a chance to have a front row seat to how companies are transforming and our customers are transforming. Uh, the world is going to dramatically change in the next 12 months. And the the best thing is going to be see the moments when humans give up control.
Yeah.
They let AI take over, uh, and give space to AI starting to do most of the work and just ask humans for help rather than the world we've been in right now. Uh,
Mm.
I'm very excited about a lot of how AI itself can solve a lot of the problems that AI is creating. And how do you get to those kinds of words and get to those kinds of paradigms? Um, and the most important thing that I've been excited about is seeing people break their personal boundaries, including with our customers. Like
Mm.
I've seen these expressions of human emotions, where the first human emotion with AI is there's some amount of fear. What if it gets it wrong? Uh, then there's a second one on need for control. Because humans are so used to I need to check mark and say yes or no to AI, and I like to think if you've seen the movie Inside Out,
Yeah.
uh, there are these emotions, like there's fear and there's
Yeah.
control and
One of
there's
my
like
favorite
lack
movies.
of
Yeah.
trust. Uh, and then there's joy. And then joy is like, why can't AI be better than a human analyst at writing descriptions if it reads all these things? Why can't? And I think at some point, like I think seeing humans go through this journey where they go from these emotions to like then they start believing in joy and inspiration and creativity, and uh, then suddenly they start doing these things that are just, it's mind blowing. And then they send you these messages and they go like, oh my god, it blew my mind. I didn't believe
Yeah.
you when you said it, but it blew my mind.
Yeah.
Just seeing that transformation it's been a joy, and I hope to have the ability to play a role in that transformation that the industry, our partners, our customers, our team will play over the next 12 to 18 months.
Awesome. We started the conversation with autonomous workflows and we end on a similar note. So thank you for that, bringing it full circle. Prukalpa, thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. This was fantastic. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Dinesh. It was lovely.